You're listening to Epic Footnote Productions. Go to Linktree/Epic Footnote for links to all of our streaming platforms, YouTube channel, social media pages, and merch site. That's linktr.ee/Epic Footnote.
Hey everyone, what's going on? It's Am I Missing Something? It's Matt.
And it's Zach.
This is the commentary platform. If you have not joined us for one of these episodes in the past, we've come up with some different topics that we'd like to talk about and really just ask the question, am I missing something? It's not about being right or being wrong. It's merely just to talk about a question. And I don't know if you've seen this recently in the news, but there have been rumblings that a little band by the name of Linkin Park may be coming back. Don't necessarily know how to feel about that.
Even just hearing you say that out loud made me kind of gasp at the expense of making this episode real short.
Well, but this is the question. Am I missing something? Why is Linkin Park talking about coming back?
So a little bit of background too. It's funny because like a few months ago at this point, out of nowhere, the singer of Orgy let it slip. Like, yeah, so I hear they're the surviving members of Linkin Park are
the two hit wonders.
Yeah, the two hit wonders. That they're in the studio with a female singer practicing and just testing the waters out. And then he tried to backtrack a little bit, but then, a few weeks later, like at the end of April, Billboard suddenly does a more, still a rumor report, but saying that like multiple sources have told them that at the very least, Mike, Brad, and Dave from Linkin Park are feeling out offers from festivals, from touring companies to potentially do a reunion. And there is indeed rumors that they are looking to have a female singer take the place. Now, granted, and we'll probably touch on this more a little later, sounds like not all the members are involved. At least, Joe Hahn doesn't seem to be involved just yet. But like, yeah, apparently they're feeling out offers. So Jay from Orgy was maybe onto something, or he fed it to Billboard to try to feel a little bit better about himself. But it's kind of hard to believe that it's been, I don't even want to say the number out loud. In 2017, very suddenly, Chester Bennington took his life. That hit me, Matt, much harder than I was prepared for. In fact, let's talk about that a little bit. Do you recall where you were, what you were thinking when you first heard the news?
I don't remember where I was, but I do remember, it was like right on the heels of Chris Cornell. And it was like, is this going to start a thing? Like, is this going to be, like a slippery slope, right? And I just thought that, it's kind of sad that what happened with Chris Cornell, Chester, didn't seek help if he needed help, right? Like there was so much that was going out with, mental health and talking about it more when Chris Cornell took his life. I think maybe, if he maybe sought some help, maybe it could have helped prevented it. But speculation and whatnot aside, it shocked the hell out of me.
Well, I think to your point, though, we can only speculate how much help he seeked out, but I think he's also proof that like depression, mental health, it's a fricker, it's a fucker. I was going to try to, I tried to censor myself like, no, fuck this. It's a fucker. And it really, one day you can be on the top of the world and the next there seems to be no hope. And it's so painful to think that that's how Chester felt because, and you've talked about this when we revisited Hybrid Theory, he made people feel so seen through the pain that he shared in his lyrics. And the fact that he didn't feel like he could have had that connection to is so, I mean, I was talking to some people about this, how like, in the grand scheme of things, unfortunately, those first two albums are what really stand out of Linkin Park. The rest of their catalog is very questionable and for various reasons, which we can talk about a little bit more later. But like even so, the last album and the song "Heavy," which at the time the band Linkin Park was not in a great place popularity wise because they were kind of getting criticized for how One More Light was really. It felt like it was trying to capture some of the more popular sounds and on the pop bandwagons, and Heavy specifically definitely sounded like it could have been on Z100. But then you listen to the lyrics, it's like Chester's like literally calling for help in this song. He's admitting that things feel heavy and no one was listening. And it sucks that like it just almost showed how terrible people online are instead of acknowledging like, hey, this guy's screaming a cry for help here. And then for me personally, going back to my original question, I remember being at work and also thinking like, oh my God, the day that Chris, would have been Chris Cornell's birthday. Like this is eerie because we also know how much that impacted him personally. He sang at Chris Cornell's funeral. He was a friend of Chris Cornell's. And then I automatically thought about my dad, which is a weird thing to say out loud. I'll provide some context. I don't know if you felt this way, Matt, in regards to your relationship with your parents, but for me, I always felt like my dad was, he had good music taste, but when it came to trying to hook him onto my favorite new artists, it was definitely a challenge. He was definitely a hard critic to win over. And the only two bands I ever got him to really like drink the Kool-Aid and, become a fan of, actually, I'm sorry, three bands. The only three bands were Foo Fighters, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Linkin Park. And I still just remember the first time listening to the album Meteora with him in the car and him actually being so impressed with Chester's vocals, specifically Chester's vocals, that he was actually excited to go to a concert of Linkin Park with me, which is also a challenge because normally if my dad had to go to a concert with me, it was, all right, he was a chaperone. My mom was always like, yeah, I like to go to concerts. My dad's like, all right, we got to beat traffic. Like we'll stay for 5 songs, but then we got to go. We got to beat the traffic. And for Linkin Park, like he was actually excited to go too. So that just automatically made like me think of that. And it was a reminder because as I mentioned, like I felt disconnected from Linkin Park pretty much after Minutes to Midnight. And it just brought back so many memories of how those first two albums actually were important in my life. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my God, this is a band I forgot how important were and I really took for granted.
Yeah, I definitely can't say that I ever had that.
Sorry to get heavy on that one, but
it is what it is. I mean, Linkin Park was very influential to me growing up, and not for any reason with parents or whatnot, but it really opened my eyes to there can be different types of music coming together and sound coherent. Like Hybrid Theory really was that. It was a hybrid theory of musical pieces that were put together that were from metal, rock, hip hop, electronica, and it worked. Whatever you may say about Reanimation or Meteora, I remember Meteora being much more controversial than like Reanimation because that was just almost like remixes. But Meteora really was like, well, is this Linkin Park? Is Linkin Park really dead? And we really didn't realize how good we had it with those first two albums because they're both classics at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny to say that Meteor was a controversial album considering that like that's classic Linkin Park compared to what we ended up getting the next few years and over a decade.
Minutes to Midnight wasn't so bad. It just wasn't as heavy as the rest of it, and it kind of softened the edges a little bit.
There was moments.
A better way to say it. There were moments,
but
it definitely softened the edges compared to Meteor and Hybrid Theory. But the most standout moment where I was like, what the hell is going on was, I believe it was for Call of Duty. I'm almost positive it was for Call of Duty. They started to preview and say that Linkin Park was doing one of the songs in the game, and it was like huge deal, and they showed the Thousand Suns cover, and then this song played, and it was like, where's anything else but just dance hall music? And
So
then the rest of that album happened, and it was, what? Hold on, where's Linkin Park?
So I mean, I think it was a song off that album too, where I kind of lost like my connection to the band too, because I think I shared this story too, and we talked about in the past, if you have to pick 3 episode, how drastically different that band changed their sound over time. I still remember they were premiering a new song live on the MTV Euro Awards, and because it was time difference, we couldn't see it live. But I was doing my first internship at a marketing company, music marketing company, and we shared a building with a bunch of studios, including this producer named The Machine, who actually produced Lamb of God, Every Time I Die, a bunch of Clutch, some of their best albums, dare I say. So he would often come in and out of our office, and he came and was like, "Hey, Linkin Park just premiered a new song. You guys want to watch the video?" I was like, "Yeah, we'll watch it." And suddenly this, like, they playing, and this Euro trash pop riff is going on, and they're like, and everyone and coworkers like, "Oh my God, what is this?" And I'm like, "Wait, why does this sound so familiar?" And then it just dawned on me, like, wait a minute, this is the exact same disco riff that was used by a band that's competing in Eurovision, which, for those who are not aware, is Imagine American Idol on steroids, and it involves countries competing against each other with singers and voting, and it's a political crazy mess right now too. And the producer who produced all these big metal bands like, "Wait, what's Eurovision?" I literally give him like a history lesson of what it is, and he's like, "Oh my God, it's amazing." I'm like, this is the best internship ever. But like, that's the moment where I'm like, what the hell is going on with Linkin Park? And that's where I really lost my personal connection with them, personal connection to the music, because it's funny how my life is intertwined with Linkin Park in different ways too, which I'll touch on in a different part of this episode. But which is why, going back to Chester's death, and I hate to say this out loud, but I touched on this a little bit earlier. Unfortunately, it took Chester's death to make so many realize, man, Linkin Park was important to me. And that's kind of why here we are in the year 2024, leading into, I mean, we're already in the midst of festivals talking about next year festival lineups and tours. Why it's not too surprising that interest in seeing some form of Linkin Park back on stage is appealing, or is even like worth having discussions about, because there's definitely a whole generation of newer bands who are not shy about saying, no, Linkin Park was my biggest inspiration and formed, this metalcore band or this band. Like, we talked about this even when we talk about new metal and its revivalism. Like, there are so many bands that maybe always have been influenced by Linkin Park, but now it's like, no, there's no denying it. I will be the first to admit that, yes, Linkin Park's my biggest influence. So of course there's a whole new generation of fans willing to get a chance to see some form of Linkin Park again live. And I think we've talked about this before too. It's like the festival market's tough in that you need headline. Like, there's definitely there's not as many headliners anymore that are drawing crowds. Like, Coachella did not do well this year. Like, the biggest draw that they had really was a No Doubt reunion, and even that wasn't able to sell out the second week of Coachella. So like, these festivals are like offering big bucks just to get whatever big name they can pull on. I guess the question, Matt, would Linkin Park coming back in 2025 be enough to draw you to a festival?
It depends the festival. I'm not going to Coachella.
Well, fair enough.
Not going to Burning Man.
Would you actually see Linkin Park with a new singer on tour?
The cynic in me is going to say no, because those tickets are going to be outrageously priced. I'd be curious. It depends on who it is and under what circumstances, right? Mm-hmm. So if you want to go down this road, I'm going to equate this to Queen. I've always said that the singer is literally the hardest person to replace in a band.
Mm-hmm.
Case in point, in a recent episode, we talked about, if you're familiar at all with a band called Damage Plan, they had Vinnie Paul and Dimebag from Pantera with a different vocalist. Didn't really do much for me, and because it just didn't sound right. Let's throw it over to my Queen example, right? So Queen, they of course had the legendary, and this is I think more apropos than Damage Plan, but I think that, you know, it's fair to say that Freddie Mercury is a legend, and when he passed away, that nobody was ever going to be able to fill his shoes, because one reason or another, the showmanship, the voice, the range, the whatnot, it really would need to have to be a home run, or somebody that the band took 100% seriously to try to replace him, right? So years go by, and then Queen gets a hold of Paul Rogers from Bad Company. And that train wreck, and I say train wreck in every sense of the word, because they put out new music, which sounded awful. The album flopped. The tour was bleh at best. And then
Hold on. Did you actually see them live with Paul Rogers? Because I saw them live with Paul Rogers, and I actually thought it was an enjoyable show.
I saw
Just throwing that out
videos.
there.
I saw videos of it, and it was bleh at best.
I enjoyed it, seeing it live, but continue.
So then the guys in Queen get a hold of some videos of Adam Lambert performing on, I believe it was American Idol. I always get those shows mixed up. But they get a hold of Adam Lambert, and they, you know, follow him in his career a little bit. He does a couple solo albums, and then all of a sudden, yeah, he ends up being the next vocalist of Queen. And there's a whole documentary, I believe it's on Netflix, that you can watch it. It's actually a really good documentary. And then he, of course, goes on to not do new recordings, but just perform live with the band. And I think Adam's showmanship and his vocal range is, nobody's going to match Freddie, but it's decent enough where it's like, okay, this guy could do Queen but not replace Freddie. And they haven't tried to record new music. And I think that's really the testament here, is like, are you going to try to carry on as a new band, or are you just going to try to live the legacy? And Adam is living the legacy. Paul Rogers tried to replace Freddie Mercury. And they're two totally different worlds. But the point is that you need to get the right fit for something. And whether or not, you know, whoever steps up to the plate for Linkin Park, it's got to either be, and I'm going to go with a real radical idea. I don't know if this is going to fly, but you either need to find a guy who can have the same chops as Chester, or have a female step in for Chester and just live the legacy. Because I think that there's some female vocalists out there now that could possibly do it. Or a very interesting idea is to leave Chester's spot open, have the band do their thing in a way where the audience could fill in for Chester. Let's face it, these songs are classic songs at this point. A lot of the fans take over the set when Mike Shinoda did in the end, you know, they filled in for Chester perfectly. So if you could do a more classic set and have the audience kind of fill in, that would be interesting as well.
So I know that they did. So shortly after Chester passed away, they did an all-star tribute show where they had multiple friends fill in on songs. I don't even think they ever like recorded and released it, but and then I think it was for Numb where they go, and Mike goes, now we want to invite the most important and special guest of all, you. Please join us in singing Chester's. And it was beautiful for that particular song, Numb. I don't think that for a whole set of that, I don't know how good that could be. Maybe for a song or two. I feel like you need to have a vocalist in for me to pay for a concert. There needs to be at least someone on stage singing a good chunk of the songs with Mike and the rest of the band.
I mean, there's no doubt Mike could do a lot of it. However, I think it'd be really cool. It could be a really cool marketing ploy to say, you get to be the lead vocalist of Linkin Park.
I feel like that's a little too gimmicky. That to me feels. I know it sounds like a cool sentiment, and that could have been. I just feel like that's a little too gimmicky, and definitely a money play. Not saying that that couldn't happen. I personally like
would it be a money play?
No, I mean this is a money play. Period. Of course, I would be more interested to see I hate saying like, oh, male vocalist, female vocalist, just vocalist. But the idea of a female vocalist kind of staying, being able to hit Chester's notes the way he would, but still maybe even add her own flair to it. That actually entices me more than just some random guy, even if he was friends with the bands taking over. Like, to me, because it's like, all right, it's a little bit different, but it's coming from a sincere place too. Like that, I think that could be interesting. But I still get nervous with the idea of, just bands continuing on of new vocalists, because as you said, that's the hardest position to fill. And if anyone has proven that replacing a vocalist is a tough, thankless gig, it's actually Chester. Let's not forget that in 2013, when Stone Temple Pilots had a very ugly and public split with Scott Weiland for, I think, the second time, instead of calling it quits like they did the first time, they made a surprise appearance at the Weenie Roast and revealed that Chester Bennington was going to be their singer. And on paper, that sounded phenomenal. They had the singer of the biggest rock band at the time filling in, who also was actually friends with the band and with Scott. Actually, it's weirdly, I think Chester even right when Velvet Revolver had split with Scott Weiland, Chester immediately said, no, I'm friends with Scott Weiland. I would never take his place in Velvet Revolver. Then he did it immediately with Stone Temple Pilots. And Chester had said that he was the biggest Stone Temple Pilots fan in the world. So on paper, it should have worked. And unfortunately, it didn't. I actually remember seeing them at the Rock Carnival festival that they had in Clark, New Jersey in 2015 and thinking, God, I really want to like this, and it just doesn't work. So, if anyone could prove that like it's not always an easy gig or great thing to, replace a singer, it's unfortunately Chester, which is ironic in this case. So it's like I'm even nervous if like could they actually pull it off? Like, because for every William Duvall in Alice in Chains, there is also a dozen Chester Benningtons and Stone Temple Pilots. That's a sad truth.
I mean, for me, that never sounded good at all. Like I never thought that Chester is melodic to a point, but he's not Scott Weiland melodic, and it just I don't know.
Didn't work.
No, it would that felt completely flat for me. I remember the announcement. I was like, huh? What? No.
It's unfortunate, and he had actually left in November 2015, ironically, like a month before Scott Weiland passed away. So it's like, it was just that whole, this is a whole different topic, but just the downfall of Stone Temple Pilots' relevancy is so sad. I know they're touring with a new singer who really does sound scarily a lot like Scott Weiland, but even that is just, it's just a shame. But going back to Linkin Park, I do want to throw out one thing I found interesting in that according to sources, not all the members seem to be part of the negotiation so far. And I am curious as to where Joe Hahn, the keyboardist turntablist, will fall. Because to me, I almost feel like his involvement or lack of involvement will really also make me feel better about this. I don't know if you feel differently about that or if you even care, but the reason why I say that is because he is actually a very talented visual artist. He's actually responsible for their music, for a lot of their music videos and their just artistic direction. So, and I can almost see Joe Hahn, if it comes out that Joe Hahn doesn't want to tour or do this because he's more focused on making movies and other creative art. Because Matt, I told you this before. I actually did PR for one of his movies back in my PR days. And I actually did I ever tell you this, Matt?
Sounds familiar.
So he had directed a movie called Mall. And they brought my agency on to help just do PR. And I actually even got to do like a press day with him, and actually a really nice guy. But I say that because he's actually a very talented visual artist, and I can very much see him going, you know what? I don't want to tour anymore. I'm enjoying not being on the road and spending more time with family while doing art. I would almost love it if they said, listen, Joe's not on tour, but he is still going to be our art director. He's still going to be in charge of the visuals. If it comes out that Joe has no involvement with whatever version of Linkin Park comes out in 2025, then that's when I'm like, all right, this is getting a little sketchy to me.
I'm going to take the other road on this one. Maybe the new art direction might be what's needed if it's a new vocalist. It's a new era for Linkin Park. If they're not just going to live the legacy and they're going to try to blaze new trails and come out guns ablazing with this new singer and do new music and the whole nine, not just, a tour to tour, but, actually do this again. I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing if you go in a different art direction. I think that Linkin Park and the record company, they could figure out a way to have a DJ replace him and, do all the electronic parts. And it could be interesting to see where they go if that's the route they choose. We don't know very much about to what extent this Linkin Park thing is going to live, right?
As of recording this, we should.
Right. We have no idea. For all we know, tomorrow they can come out and say that they've got the singer, they've got the dates, and they're just going to do the legacy stuff. The art direction might make getting Hahn on board might be easier if it's just the legacy, if he's the art director. But, to take it in a whole new direction, maybe they just cut ties and say, you know what? We have this idea, and we have kind of a concept of where we want to take it. We're going to say thank you, and we're going to go our separate ways.
But in that case, then, should it even be called Linkin Park?
Mike Shinoda's in it. Of course, it's going to be called Linkin Park.
Well, they can call it different. I don't know. Like, to me, it's like, if the first tour is not going to be a celebration of the legacy, then, and it's just going to be a, hey, we're bringing new life into Linkin Park, then why bother, considering everything that's happened? I mean, we talk about the quote unquote new version tribute band, whatever the hell you want to call it, of Pantera a lot in our episodes, where, we got Anselmo and Rex Brown reforming and touring as Pantera with Zakk Wylde and Charlie Benante, and they keep saying, oh, it's a tribute to the brothers, it's a tribute to the legacy. And they keep saying, we're just doing shows, we're not doing new music. But then as each month and show goes by, they go, well, we're not really, like, they just kind of keep like slowly backpedaling so that when the day does come that they release a new album and songs, they're not called complete liars, even though if you look at the day one interviews, yes, they would be. To me, it's like, if they had just come right out of the back going, hey, we're called Pantera, here's new artwork, here's new visuals, and here's a new song, I think we would, like, the fan reaction to that would have been way more like, what the hell is this? What, like, so how would that be different if Linkin Park did that? Like, wouldn't they have to a certain degree, like, go to the, hey, we're going to give you a show that will make you, remember the legacy of Linkin Park fondly, whether you had got to see them live or if you never did, you'll get to feel like you did. Maybe in a year or two, depending on how, we gel as a band, then we'll start kind of like with Alice in Chains, how they kind of did start off as like the first 2-3 years as just a tribute band with all with the former members and a new singer, and then release new music. So like, wouldn't you kind of have to have all the original ingredients that are at least still around?
Not really. No, I don't think so. Because let's put it this way, right? Like, what if? Because the only thing that prevented the Pantera reunion was Vinnie Paul and Phil's hatred for each other. Like, if they got on the same page, you don't think that they would have done it ahead of time?
Well, they came very close. I think I've shared this story a few times too, where during one of my summer internships at that marketing agency, I found out that Pantera still actually had like a legacy manager and PR agency that kind of just helped kind of, make sure that their legacy and their like back catalog was being handled correctly. And it got revealed, and it was like, you'd be surprised at how close a Pantera reunion has gotten. And without actually saying why, it's like Vinnie Paul just doesn't want to do it. Like, every time they get close, he ends up pulling out. So it's like, of course, the second Vinnie Paul died, Phil Anselmo announced that he was doing a tour of Pantera classics. Yeah. And of course, once things got better with the pandemic, this happened. So yeah, of course, but like, still, they wouldn't have changed the logo.
I think
Vinnie Paul was in it.
No. But this is like, as sad as it was that Dime died, Dime was still a guitarist. Zakk Wylde is doing a hell of a job, probably the best job that anybody's ever going to do to honor Dime. But he's a guitarist at the end of the day. I've said this before, you can buy his guitar, you can buy his setup, you can buy his pedals. The only thing that you can't buy is the fingers, right? You can get extremely close. Like, if anybody's going to be able to do it, it's Zakk, and learn the little nuances and intricacies that Dime brought to his playing, and learn it and play it as close to him as you can, and maybe with your own little flair. And that's what Zakk is doing. But a human's voice is stupidly unique.
Absolutely.
So I think that's what makes it even harder with the vocalist here. And I don't care who you are as a band, you're not going to be able to replace them and be as successful with the same material. You almost have to do something new and different in order for you to have a shot, right? Like, look at Black Sabbath, Dio and Ozzy, two completely different vocalists, two completely different styles of music. So they couldn't do the same doom metal that they were doing with Ozzy in the beginning. They had to pivot and change. And then when Ozzy came back, they went back to that classic sound. And they really haven't crossed over the songs between the two singers when they were in and out of the band. So it's like, here I almost feel like it's got to be that two different levels of Linkin Park. It's the Chester Linkin Park and the whoever version of Linkin Park.
So I think also something that we need to remember, and another reason another reason why I think it's safe to say that this will probably be a legacy, at least start off as a legacy kind of celebration. For those who are like going, well, why now? Let's not forget what 2025 marks. It marks 25 years since Hybrid Theory came out. So there's going to be a lot.
You shut your mouth.
Yeah. Hey, Matt. Ready to feel old?
Shut your mouth.
Hybrid Theory turns 25.
You mean it turns 5 years? 5
I
years old.
wish that was true. Remember how we not that long ago were celebrating the 20th anniversary by revisiting that episode for past
Shut
episode
up.
2 minutes review? That was almost 5 years ago when we did that. And we're Matt, I really hate saying this out loud, and I actually do want to get your opinion on this topic too. Next year, 2025, Linkin Park will become eligible for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Barf. Not because that's a thing, but because it's a thing.
Well, not because oh my God, they could be in the Hall of Fame. Like, oh my God, they're old enough
To be in the Hall of Fame.
to be in the
Yeah.
Hall of Fame.
Barf.
Like, so
You
in
know what?
regards
Actually,
to timing, it's like, all right, yeah, there's like, how many remastered versions of Hybrid Theory can you release?
so I don't know if I've ever told you this, but this is actually quite funny since you want to talk about how old we are.
Mm-hmm.
Before they became famous, they opened up for somebody at the Starland Ballroom, and I saw Linkin Park before Hybrid Theory came out. And I just remember thinking, oh, Linkin Park. That's a town here in Jersey. I wonder if they're from Linkin Park. And funny enough, years later, the show Good Mythical Morning actually did a thing with Linkin Park in Linkin Park, New Jersey. But that's neither here nor there. But I very vividly remember saying, oh, who's this band? Oh, they're Linkin Park. Oh, that's funny. So, unbeknownst to me, yeah, I saw a very, very, very young Linkin Park.
Yeah, my first time seeing them live was, I hate to say this out loud now too, over 21 years ago, Summer Sanitarium tour with Metallica and Limp Bizkit. They
I
were
saw them
already
there
big.
too. I have the T-shirt.
I have the T-shirt too, and I remember like when Hybrid Theory came out, I initially was like trying to be cool because they were already they were already kind of on the popular side with that album, or I was already in my phase where I'm like, no, I like true metal stuff, and I'm a jerk, pouty pouty. And I remember seeing Linkin Park live on that tour, and actually that was the first time my dad even heard them too because he was at that show with me, and we both were like, oh wow, these guys are really good, and that's how I became hooked. And I think maybe that's why I'm also really hesitant about Linkin Park reuniting with a new lineup, because they were such a great band live. And I don't know how I feel about seeing them trying to recapture it without some key ingredients. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that's where I'm also like, I have so many fond memories of seeing them live that I don't know if I don't know if I'm ready for the emotions that will happen, good or bad, at the sight of whatever Linkin Park looks like in 2025 live.
You music snob.
Not even like and that's the thing too, and not even like in a snobby way, or maybe in a snobby way. I actually don't know. Maybe I'm afraid I'm going to go, oh, this is not as good, or maybe I'm just kind of like how when Chester passed away, a flood of emotions came back with just all of the personal memories of hearing that music, as a kid and a teenager. Maybe I'm afraid that's even going to come back. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if Zach in 2025 is ready for what will happen with a new version of Linkin Park. Maybe that's it. But Matt, as I mentioned, and we need to have a serious conversation about this, Matt.
Go on.
Linkin Park will
Linkin
be
Park.
eligible for Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. Not to
Does
say
not
that they'll
compute.
even be nominated next year. But we have to ask ourselves a really honest question. Not whether we think they will be nominated, but do we think that they should be inducted their first year?
404 error, page not found.
You're not willing to admit this? That this
No.
is even a real thing? Because my initial thought was, no, they should not be in the Hall of Fame this early. And I'm like, wait, what the hell am I talking about this early? Like, why not? Because, like I said, those first two albums alone were extremely influential on a ton of hard rock and rock bands of the past 25 years. And
Mhm.
say what you will about the albums that came out after those two albums, there are bands currently in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, cough, Sex Pistols, cough, who are only in the Hall of Fame off of one actual album. So why shouldn't Linkin Park be inducted into Hall of Fame in their first year?
Well, whenever Linkin Park gets nominated in their first year, years down the road, because they're not
Yes,
going, it's the 2025 is not the year that they can first be nominated. Because
why
they're
not?
not that old. They're not that old of a band. Okay.
Technically, they are though.
We're celebrating only 5 years of Hybrid Theory. What are you talking about? First off,
if you look at the actual guidelines and rules, not because yes, to Matt's
you're breaking up. You're breaking up. What?
to Matt's defense, the Hall of Fame does have a tendency to wait a little too long to even nominate eligible bands for induction, let alone actually induct them. There are some bands that end up going closer to 30 years to 50 or even 50 years before they even get nominated, let alone inducted. I mean, Judas Priest, a band that we both, agree should, absolutely be in the Hall of Fame. It took them about 50 years to finally get their induction into the Hall of Fame. And even that, like, you can kind of argue is a little weird, like the way that they kind of slipped in. So, the chances of Linkin Park getting nominated their first year is unlikely. I think it takes a band that's still like huge and still recording almost to get that kind of like, all right, you're in first year eligible. I can't say they shouldn't be, I guess, inducted into the Hall of Fame their first year, or even eventually inducted into the Hall of Fame. I have a hard time finding reasons other than me not wanting to believe that they are actually eligible. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm struggling to find the words here because I hate even admitting that Linkin Park is old enough to be in the Hall of Fame.
Hold on. We're celebrating 5 years, right? Because Hybrid Theory 20th anniversary edition came out 5 years ago. Okay,
so this is the first time I think anyone has tried to find a loophole into not getting a band into any institution or Hall of Fame. You want to? Are you trying to help Linkin Park avoid the fees they'd have to pay to get a table for the Hall of Fame ceremony? You're like, no, guys, don't worry, you're not eligible. Don't go.
I'm just trying to admit that I'm not as old as I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because those orthopedics in your Vans shoes are not fooling anyone. Yeah.
Well, joke's on you. I don't have Vans.
We're old. I remember listening to Hybrid Theory at the soda pop fountain. Playing jacks with my gal.
Or in my first car with a CD player.
That actually feels even worse to say.
Yeah.
That feels even more old-timey. Why did you say that, you jerk?
All right, here, I'll add on to it. In my first car with a manual transmission and a CD player that had a graphic of dolphins on it.
What the fuck? What?
You've never seen that?
No. Why dolphins?
Oh, see, look, this is how old-timey I am.
Man.
My radio had one of the faceplates that pop off for security reasons, and because it was cool and special, you could put all different graphics on it. So you could put like a race car, you could put dolphins.
And you chose dolphins.
Well, that's the most notable one.
That's the most notable. Okay, so You're not speaking of personal experience of.
No, I had the race car or the music gauges because it told you how loud your music was.
I'm trying to. So before I ask this question, and I'll explain why I'm about to ask this question, I'm trying to picture you in that with the dolphin background, just singing along to In the End, which leads me to my next question. And this is a very important question that maybe is going to get into the most serious conversation we've all had in our entire experience doing this podcast.
The dolphins were blue.
No, I figured. When you would sing along to In the End, were you doing Mike or Chester's parts?
Both.
You did both. Oof.
Absolutely both.
That is bold.
well, being a huge fan of Eminem at the time, of course you want to do the hip hop parts, but then you love the rock and metal, and then you do the Chester parts. So you end up doing the whole damn thing.
Here's how you know you've matured in life. When you're young, you go for the mic parts so you can be the rap fun guy. But then as you get older, you appreciate Chester's part and you sing along to that part instead. That's how you can tell yourself, okay, I've gotten old. I'm now singing to the Chester parts in the intro, at least.
No, still do both.
You'd like to disagree? Like, are we about to have a debate on
this?
All right. So to wrap things up a little bit, in the end, where do you stand on a potential Linkin Park reunion in 2025? Yay or nay? Or not sure still?
I'm curious, and I'm only curious because I want to see which route they take. If they do the legacy thing and honor the legacy, great. If they go new, that I don't know how I feel about.
I can tell you, I would only be okay if they go the legacy route to begin with, at least. Like, I would only be comfortable with them at least. In an ideal world, the way they at least start this, if they come back in 2025, it is we are celebrating the Hybrid Theory anniversary by performing the album and also plus hits. Performing Hybrid Theory in its entirety plus hits for special festival appearances and tour. We brought in a special vocalist. I would love it if it's a female vocalist to make it a little bit different, but still unique. And we're celebrating the legacy. And then 2 years later, after they tour the world, because we know it would be a 2-year tour, then they go, you know what? We really felt creatively juiced from this. We want to keep playing and touring and maybe even explore Meteora a little bit more in depth. And then slowly they start to produce some new stuff. I would be okay if they take that approach. That to me is the ideal scenario. Would I prefer that over nothing? That is where I'm still questioning myself, to be honest. But what say you, listeners? Are you hoping that Linkin Park, against all odds, makes a grand return next year? Or are you still uncomfortable with the idea of there being a Linkin Park without Chester? Let us know what you think on Facebook, Instagram, X/Twitter, Threads, TikTok, at Epic Footnote. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can hear a ton of episodes like this, as well as our revisiting review of Hybrid Theory in celebration of 20th anniversary. Thank you all so much for listening. And in the end, it doesn't really matter.
Yes, it does. You matter.
Oh, shucks. Thanks, man.